The one thing that you can't create more of, and we're told this in Ephesians chapter 5, we're told that we're supposed to be very careful then how we live. Now, it's important to note that when it says there in our modern translations, be very careful then how you live, that's actually, that English word careful, it was originally a Greek word that the Apostle Paul wrote. And the word that he wrote there, it doesn't just mean careful. Here's what it means. It means make sure that you have your eyes open. Isn't that a great way to kind of illustrate it? Make sure that you have your eyes open. Be very, very discerning in how you live, making the most of every opportunity. And the reason it's important that we make the most of every opportunity is because destiny is not a matter of chance, it's a matter of choice. It's not something to be hoped for, it's something to be attained. That quote was originally spoken by William Jennings Bryan when he was running for president in 1896. But I first heard that quote just a few months, really just a few weeks after I became a Christ follower. You see, I didn't grow up in church. In fact, I grew up in a home that was anti-church. We thought you folks were pretty weird. And now, having spent 32 years in ministry, I'm convinced that my family was for the most part correct. That being said, everybody's normal until you get to know them, right? And so we're pretty normal until you get to know us. And then once you get to know us a little bit, you realize that we would fit in really well with the church crowd. Anyway, I'm not gonna belabor that point. But I grew up not just unchurched. I grew up anti-churched, and my family really didn't have anything to do with church. I'm the 12th of 13 children, born in Illinois. When I was 7 years old, we moved from Illinois to Florida. My father had sold a number of businesses that he owned to start a new business venture with a few partners. And we moved there in March of 1973. That makes me 58 years old if you want to do the math. We moved there in March of 1973. My father died September 29th of 1973. And when he died, within just a few weeks, we were penniless because the people that my father were engaged in business with robbed us of everything. And so we went from being financially comfortable to being truly destitute poor. My mother, not knowing how to cope, my father's funeral was the 2nd of October. My mother's first date with a new man was Halloween. He moved in Thanksgiving weekend, and he was a violent drunk and child abuser. Hospitalized me 4 times, tried to kill me 3 times. And I gotta tell you, when you're a child and you lose a parent and then you have this step-parent come into your world and it brings violence and upheaval, here's what it'll do. It'll make you angry and bitter. And by the time I was a teenager, I was a truly angry and bitter young man, self-medicating with alcohol, experimented with marijuana a little bit, but didn't enjoy it a whole lot. And but don't judge me. And but was pretty messed up by the time I got to be my junior year in high school. My escape was academics and athletics. And I played on the high school football team. The first day of school, my junior year in high school, I'm riding my bike home from football practice when I'm hit by a drunk driver. And so I actually, as I saw the car coming at me, even though unchurched, anti-church, I prayed. Because you find this, right? That deep inside each and every one of us, we really know, at core level, we know that God exists. And even though we might claim to be atheist, agnostic, not engaged in all of this, in those moments, we instinctively will cry out to the God that created us. And I did that. I cried out to God and I said, "Dear God, please let me land in grass." Now, for those of you that might be new to this idea of walking in relationship and talking with God, I would encourage you that when you pray, that you need to pray with some specificity. Because I prayed, "Dear God, let me land in grass," which I did. But before I landed in grass, I hit a no parking sign. I didn't ask God, "Let me fly through the air with no impediment," and then land. Just let me land in grass. And so anyway, I hit the no parking sign, landed in grass. That night, found myself in the hospital, broken leg, internal injuries. And as I lay in the hospital bed, God spoke to me. And once again, no relationship with God, but I knew that it was very God speaking to me. And he said this to me. He said, Ed, it could have been more than your leg. It could have been your life. Where will you spend eternity? It's interesting, God asks me this question. Why? Because destiny is not a matter of chance, it's a matter of choice. It's not something to be hoped for, it's something to be attained. And the choices that you make determine your destiny. And so in those moments, here was my response to God. I said, God, all right, here's the deal. Have you ever tried to make a deal with God? Okay, God, here's the deal. I'm gonna give you 90 days. I'll pray, read my Bible, go to church. You got 90 days to prove yourself real. If you can't do it in 90 days, I don't wanna have anything to do with you because I think you've done a pretty poor job with my life up to this point. I didn't say pretty poor job, but if I use the terminology that I used there in the hospital, Pastor Caleb will be coming up on the platform to escort me off the stage. And so we won't do that. But anyway, God in those 90 days proved himself dramatically real. Made my way to a church, got involved in a youth group, and went to this large youth gathering, this youth convention with about 3,000 students. And the speaker made this statement: destiny is not a matter of chance, it's a matter of choice. It's not something to be hoped for, it's something to be attained. And even though that was penned more than 80 years earlier, it was as if God was sovereignly speaking it prophetically in that moment to me. And here's what I came to the realization. I came to the realization that even though I walk with a limp, not because of the accident that I had, but because of the daily beatings that I took, even though I bear on my body the scars of growing up in an abusive environment, that while I'm not responsible for those scars and I'm not responsible for the limp, I am responsible for what my life looks like from this day forward. Because friends, destiny is not a matter of chance, it's a matter of choice. The choices that you make determine your destiny. And so when God says this, I want you to live your life with your eyes open. That's what Ephesians 5 says. Be very careful then. Live your life with your eyes open, making the most of every opportunity. God calls us to be opportunistic. He calls us to be risk takers. And I want you to hear me this morning. It is impossible to live the life that God has for you, to live out the plan he has for you, to embrace the destiny that he has for you without taking some risk. Now, I'm curious to see what we have in the way of risk takers here. Anybody here ever bungee jump? Got any bungee jumpers in the crowd? A few? Okay. I've done that. I don't know if that's risk or reckless. In my 20s when I did it, it seemed like risk. Now at 58, it seems kind of reckless. Anybody ever jump out of an airplane? Can I just ask you why? Like, why would you jump out of a perfectly good airplane? That, to me, is the definition of insanity. The closest that I want to get to recklessness as it relates to an airplane is flying Spirit Airlines. That's the closest I want to get. Okay. Risk. What is risk? Risk is driving down Interstate 5. We were driving down Interstate 5 yesterday, and out of nowhere, the traffic just stops for some inexplicable reason. My suitcase, which was in the very back of this SUV we're driving, managed to come through the second seat and smack me in the back of the head. So by the way, if I don't make sense this morning, maybe I'm slightly concussed and you can give me some grace. But so risk is driving down Interstate 5. Reckless is Interstate 5 during rush hour. Why? Right? Why? It makes absolutely no sense. We live these lives, and oftentimes what will happen is this, is instead of living the life that God has for us, which is this life of making the most of every opportunity, oftentimes what will happen is we'll go to one of two other extremes. We'll live our life risk averse. We'll cocoon to try to protect ourselves from every issue, from every potential hardship, from every danger. And friends, I want you to know this, that just like God created a ship, and a ship is safe in the harbor, but it's not what it's made for. God created you to sail. He created you for purpose and destiny. But you can't do that staying in the harbor. Sometimes what will happen is we'll go to the opposite extreme and we'll be reckless. And you know what recklessness is? Recklessness, quite honestly, is the enemy's counterfeit to try to keep you from living out what God has for you and position you for a place where you don't experience destiny, but instead you experience destruction. God wants us to live the life that he has for us because he wants us to step in to the promises of God. You know, if you read through the Bible, you'll find that there are a little over 7,000 promises. A little over 7,000 promises. And God keeps each and every one of them. But most of those promises are what I like to call if-then propositions. If I do this, then God promises this. And one of my favorites, one of the ones that resonates the most to me, and quite honestly, the one that I think is key for our conversation today is actually found in Isaiah 58. In Isaiah 58, starting in verse 9, here's what God says prophetically to his children in the moment and to us today. He says this: if you'll do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing of finger and malicious talk, which I think sounds a lot like the world, not just in Isaiah's day. I think it sounds a lot like our world today, right? If you don't believe me, watch a rerun of this week's debate, and you know what? We're not going to talk about that. That probably would be bad, right? So we're just going to gloss right over that. Pretend I didn't even say that. I do think that it describes much of religion today, though. I think it describes a lot of the church today, right? If you'll do away with the yoke of oppression. A lot of religion today, a lot of the church today is let me pull you into my particular brand of legalism. Let me tell you all the rules and regulations you need to follow, right? Isn't that what church is? Don't smoke, don't dance, don't drink, don't chew, don't hang around with those that do. Anybody else grow up learning that? Right? But if you'll do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing of finger, let me tell you what's wrong with you. Let me tell you all of the mistakes in your life, right? If you'll do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing of finger and the malicious talk, let me tell you about him. God's word says this: if we'll do away with that in our life, and instead, if we'll spend ourselves on behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, if we will meet those that God has called us to impact, if we'll meet their physical needs and their spiritual needs. I love that, okay? So if I will avoid what is so much of culture, and if I will avoid so much of what's embodied in religion, and instead, if I'll truly be Jesus to people, if I'll meet their physical need and spiritual need, God says this: then your light will shine in the darkness, your night will become like a noonday sun. The Lord will guide you always, he will strengthen your frame. You'll be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. You will rebuild the ancient ruins. You will raise up the age-old foundations, and your people will be called the restorers of streets with dwellings. I think that's what all of us want. We want this life that matters. We want to count. We want our light to shine. We want to know that we're walking with God, and we want him to protect us, provide for us, and guide us, and we want to make a difference that lasts. We want to leave a legacy. And Isaiah 58 describes how we do that. Friends, you cannot do that without stepping in to the destiny that God has for you and making the choices that cause you to leverage or make the most of every opportunity. And that means this: it means I'm gonna have to step out of my cocoon and take some risks. It means that I'm gonna have to do some evaluation in my life and eliminate those things in my life that really are reckless. It means I'm gonna have to surrender some habits to God. I'm gonna have to give a relationship to God to position myself right where he wants me to be. Well, how do we do that? I think that Jesus describes it very well in a conversation that he has with his disciples at a pretty interesting time. It's just a couple of days before Jesus is gonna go to the cross to pay the ultimate sacrifice for the sin of mankind. It's right in the middle of what's often called Holy Week or Passion Week. On Sunday, it's the triumphal entry, what we know now as Palm Sunday. People shout, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. The next day, Monday, Jesus curses a barren fig tree. He goes in, he cleans out the temple, has some interesting conversations, goes back. Each day, he goes back over the Mount of Olives to Bethany. By the way, if you're reading scripture and you hear about Jesus being on the Mount of Olives or Jesus going across the Mount of Olives, if you've not been to Israel, if you've not experienced this, let me kind of give you comparison, because living in the Northwest and you hear terms like Mount Rainier, how long would it take for us to walk to the top of Mount Rainier? Days, right? Anybody ever walk to the top of Mount Rainier? Liar. Anyway, to walk from the very bottom of the Mount of Olives is the Kidron Valley. To walk from the bottom of the Kidron Valley up to the Garden of Gethsemane, which is about halfway, will take you about 20 minutes. To walk from the Garden of Gethsemane to the top of the Mount of Olives is another about a 15-minute walk. I know if you live in Washington, something that you can walk up in 30 minutes is not a mountain, it's a hill. But it's the best they could do in Israel, so let them have it. It's the Mount of Olives. So Holy Week, each night, Jesus would go back across, he would go from Jerusalem back across the Kidron Valley, past the Garden of Gethsemane, up on top of the Mount of Olives to the other side to Bethany. Tuesday, he makes his way again. It's a busy day. He starts by avoiding an entrapment that the religious sect of the day had set. Then he teaches the multitudes. After a full day, they're making their way back across. They walk down from the Temple Mount, across the Kidron Valley, and they're coming back up, headed on the Mount of Olives. It doesn't specifically say. I'm guessing that this probably happens about the Garden of Gethsemane. And they sit down to rest, and Jesus' disciples say, tell us about the end of days. Tell us about the end of time. Jesus, tell us what's about to come. And he tells them 3 parables. And the first parable is the parable of the wise and the foolish virgins. And that parable, let me summarize, is Jesus saying, listen, the master could come back at any moment, and so you need to be ready. But the master could also delay, and so you need to live your life wise. Because nobody knows the hour at which the master is coming back. Now keep in mind, he's already told them that he is going away. So this just is an affirmation. So when he's referring to the master, he's referring to himself. And then the third parable that he tells is the parable of the sheep and the goats. I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was sick and in prison and you came to me. But in the middle, he tells this parable, the parable of the talents. And it describes to us how we're supposed to be these wise risk takers. And friend, I believe this. I believe that it's providential that God has me here this morning and that God brought you here, that he's got you at each one of the campuses, that he's got you watching online because he wants to challenge you to live your life as wise and understand that that means stepping into opportunity, which means taking some risk. So this parable, the parable of the talents there in Matthew 25, starting in the 14th verse, it says this, again, the kingdom of heaven is like. And Jesus begins to unpack the story, right? The kingdom of heaven is like a master. He is going to go away on a long journey. And before he does, he brings his trusted servants in, 3 of them in the story. And he resources each one of them. And I love this. It doesn't say that he gives some of, it says he gives what he has, right? Because God entrusts to us what he has. But he gives to each one of the servants according to their ability. By the way, that's key. And I'll tell you why that's key. Understand this, that God's never gonna ask you to be responsible for more than what you can handle. God's never gonna ask you to take risk that's beyond your ability when you're walking in step with him. Right? So, yes, it's risk, but it's not reckless. Because the master always resources the risk that he calls you to. Let me say that again. The master always resources the risk that he's called you to, that you're created for. Right? And why? Why are we created to take risk? Well, I believe that Jesus really somewhat references this way back in John 10:10 when he says this, that the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I have come that you might have life and have it to its full. Okay, where's my bungee jumper? Over here, right? Okay, was it scary? Was it also pretty thrilling? Absolutely. Probably one of the coolest things I've ever done. Where are my people that have jumped out of airplanes and parachutes? Are you still medicated? Because I still say that's crazy. No. It's pretty exhilarating, isn't it? Okay, that free fall. How far did you fall before you pulled the cord? Did you, pretty decent amount of time? Yeah. Like I'm gonna wanna pull the cord. Like, can I pull the cord about a minute before I jump out of the plane? I will say this, I have been in an airplane that lost a door. Yes, so real quickly, La Costeña Airlines, I was flying from Managua, Nicaragua to San Carlos, Nicaragua, Nueva Guinea, Nicaragua, and we're up at about 500 feet, Cessna Caravan, the door's in the back, door falls off, the pilot, female pilot, does this. Like, not again. If you're ever in Nicaragua, don't fly La Costeña Airlines, that's all I'm saying. And so how about you? Do you remember how far you fell? Pre-fall? 13.5. That's a long way. That's even farther than I can hit a golf ball. Yeah, no, I'm not, but it was pretty exhilarating, wasn't it? Okay, now, let me ask you this. Did you have training before you did that? Did anybody's heart just skip a beat? Yeah, here's what I love about even the story of the parable of the talents. By the way, oftentimes when we read this, because maybe we don't understand what talent is, it's not, when it says the parable of talents, it's not talking about abilities. In the day that this was written, when Jesus gave this story, what a talent was a sum of money, okay? So you had shekels, you had denarii, and then you had talents, okay? So a denarii was the equivalent of one man's daily wage, and he was paid in shekels, okay? And a one man's daily wage would have been about 20 shekels. So, but a denarii was a daily wage. A talent was the weight of a man in silver, which in Jesus' day, silver was worth much more than gold. It was the most precious metal on the planet. So it was considered to be the weight of a man in silver, or it was the equivalent of about 6,000 denarii. 6,000 denarii, if you work 6 days a week, 6,000 denarii would be about 20 years' wages. So in our economy, the median income in Pierce County is about $89,000. So it'd be about a talent would be about $1 million. So the person that was given 5 talents was given about 5 million. The person that was given 2 talents was given about $2 million. And the person that was given 1 talent was given about $1 million, right? This is no small thing that they were given. The master goes away, and then they go to work. Well, sort of. The master comes back after some time, which I love this. You know what? This is a reminder. Jesus is telling his disciples, and prophetically he's telling us that there's a day he's coming back. And I also want you to know that oftentimes people will misunderstand the character and the heart of God. They think that God's some big bloodshot eyeball and this guy with lightning bolt in hand waiting for you to do bad things to where he can zap you with this lightning bolt. But here's what I want you to understand, that God is crazy about you. He's absolutely crazy about you, and he is a rewarder. And Jesus makes this very clear in the parable of the talents, right? The first gentleman that he deals with, the first servant, 5 talents, $5 million. He says, oh, master, I am super excited that you're back. I want to show you what I did. The five talents that you gave me, I took them, I put them to work, and I was actually able to double the money. And here's what the master says. Way to go. Man, I am so proud of you. That is awesome what you did. In fact, you know what? You've been faithful in little. I want to put you in charge over much. And I want you to experience all of the joy of the Lord. Next comes in the guy who had been given 2 talents. Same story. I took what you gave me. I worked it. And I got double. Man, you are incredible. Great job. I knew you could do it. You know what? You've been faithful with that to which I've entrusted you. You were faithful in little. I'm going to give you charge over much, and I want you to enter into the master's happiness. Then Jesus, to give this contrast, he says, and then the one that was given 1 talent, the one that would seemingly have the least amount of responsibility and the least amount of risk, makes this statement. Master, I knew that you were a hard person and that you punish those who don't respond. Where does that even come from? Because in the rest of the parable, that's not the impression that we get of the master at all. It sure seems like the master is a rewarder. It sure seems like the master will never put you in a place that will bring pressure in your life beyond what you can navigate. He's going to stretch you, right, to where he can reward you. But because of a misunderstanding of the heart of the master, the servant with 1 talent is risk averse. And some of us can really relate to that because we don't fully understand the heart of God, because we don't fully understand the plan of God and the purpose of God. We're kind of stuck in this safe mode, in this risk-averse mode. And the way that we handle our life, the way that we handle our relationships, the way that we handle our gifts, talents, and abilities. And if you'll allow me to even go there, the way that we handle our resources. God, I know that your word says, given it shall be given. I know that your word says things like, those who give to the poor lend to the Lord and I will repay. God, I know what Isaiah 58 says, that if I'll spend myself on behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, that you're going to do all this for me. But because, God, I'm not totally sure about it, I'm gonna live my life risk averse. Or, God, because I'm not sure that you're gonna take care of me, I'm gonna do what I jolly well please and live my life reckless. But friends, destiny is not a matter of chance, it's a matter of choice. And the choices that we make determine our destiny. And it's important that we understand that because our destinies are intertwined. And God's design for your life is for you to be salt and light. God's design for your life is for you to have a God-sized footprint. God's design for your life is for you to have impact. It's to impact people like Alicia, a mom that Jody and I had the opportunity to meet a few weeks ago when we were in Guatemala. Alicia lives in the village of Patsun. She's got 6 daughters. 6 daughters. Man, think of 6 daughters. I've got a son and I've got a daughter. I will just say this, my son is easy. My daughter's watching right now. Hi, Lauren. So anyway, she's watching online. She was wonderful. She was so easy. Whew. Did I get out of that one? My wife is shaking her head, no. 6 daughters. Alicia's husband has ran off and left them. Can I tell you, in Guatemala, if you're a single mom and you've got 6 daughters, there's not much hope. In fact, chances are pretty good that each one of those daughters is going to have a child of their own before they turn 14 years of age. Chances are very high that your daughters are either going to be married or they're going to be human trafficked before they hit 16. But because of the heart of Sound Life Church, because of the generosity of some people in the Northwest, Alicia's daughters are still with her. In fact, they've got a picture of Alicia and 4 of her daughters. We stopped by their home and we had the opportunity to see them working their craft. They're part of our women's empowerment program. And they make this beautifully intricate, they weave this beautifully intricate fabric that they sell in the market, either as fabric or they'll make it into shirts and dresses. And what amazed me when Jody and I went to their home was the smile on the girl's face, the diligence with which they worked their trade, and the songs that they were singing. And Alicia and her girls know this. They know that they have a dignity and they have a destiny. Because there are some people in Tacoma that know that God's called them to be a risk taker in every area of their life, including how they handle their resources. That God wants to say to them, well done, thou good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in little. I want to give you charge over much. Enter into all of the master's happiness. I could talk about Elvis. Elvis, isn't that a great name? Elvis. He's a farmer who is working the high tunnels, making sure that tomato plants that are used in our children's feeding program, that they grow strong and tall. But for the sake of time, let me just tell you about one more group and introduce you to Alice. Alice leads our children's feeding program in Madagascar. And we had a team about 18 months ago that went to Madagascar for the very first time. And in their trip, they went to a village called Sebo de Fui. And Sebo de Fui, when they landed, they were immediately surrounded by 257 children. And these children were just like, children are the same around the world. You ever notice that? Here's what they're gonna do. They're gonna play and they're gonna laugh. And the kids surround them, they wanna play and they wanna laugh. But what our team noticed, we've got a picture that they'll put up on the screen. What our team noticed was that all of the children had orange hair. Now that orange hair, it's not because of heredity. It's not because they're out in the sun a lot, and it's not because of their diet. It's actually because they have nothing to eat, and it's the sign of a significant protein deficiency. In fact, when our team met with the tribal leader said that the children of Sebo de Fui on a daily basis will eat dirt to try to satisfy their hunger pains. And he said this, he said, you people, you white people, you often come and you take pictures and you make promises, but you never come back. Well, here's something I want you to know about Convoy of Hope. Convoy of Hope always, always, always operates at the highest form of integrity. We always do what we say we're gonna do, and we always underpromise and overdeliver. And so we told that tribal leader, you know what? This is gonna be different because we're gonna be the people that came back. And I'm proud to say this, that 18 months later, that there are no children in Sebo de Fui that still have orange hair. In addition to those 257,000 children, there are right at 6,000 children that are now being fed in Madagascar. And I want to give you just a small glimpse into how that's happening and the impact that it's making. Take a look.
The majority of Malagasy people are farmers. It's really hard for family to make ends meet. Because of that lack of good quality and quantity food for the children, they are facing malnutrition. God provided me opportunities to go study overseas. I always wanted to come back to my own country and serve in my country. I never knew how. But then God just put me on the path of Convoy of Hope.
Voglio messaggio sono Jerry vai karakana rin ray aman-dreny mpianatra ny sakafo ny mpianatra.
Teo dia nandanja ny herinandro alohan'ny nanana zany nandanja ny aloha herinandro ny aloha zany satria na nitanjaka izy na hery na inona amin'ilay sakafo na fahaizana zany hitahita aloha zaho mahita tena mafanatenana.
As Convoy of Hope, we are fighting malnutrition. And we provide daily lunch at school from Monday to Friday.
When kids are malnourished, they are not really motivated to do things such as studying. Because studying requires a lot of strength from body and brains.
It's painful because we're trying to reach as much as we can, but still there are many kids that need help around the island. It shouldn't be this way because all those children were made equally in the eyes of God.
Mbola tsy mianatra fa hoe tao an-trano ireo tsy nisy sakafo dia tena hoe matsiaro tena hoe nonitra.
Ary indray raha ohatra hoe tamin'ny mbola tsy miambary dia ao aty am-pianarana dia fa hoe efa misy varany am-pianarana dia rehefa nitazana nianatra amin'izay pianarana dia ny misakafo dia ohatra hoe malagadalagy zany zany ny saina. Ary finaritra sady afahana hoe ondriry.
Seeing those children eating at the school, it really touched my heart. There is a bright future for those kids.
When we see them getting the right food and enough food to have the strength that they deserve to have, it's just a blessing. Yeah.
Oh, this is the kingdom realm.
We've been feeding for 1 year, and we would like to take this all around the island.
I feel heaven close.
Iarina teto taon'izay rehetra ny hoentintsika ny amin'ny toerana hafa eto Madagasikara, toerana maromaro dia hita fa hiova tanteraka ny Madagasikara.
Because of Convoy of Hope, there's a light at the end of the tunnel for each of the kids.
Faith can move my mountains, oh let faith now fill my heart. 'Cause the kingdom it is coming, and yet it's here right now. So I'll close my eyes and lift my sights on heaven all around.
Seeing them smile and laugh and just waving at us just bring joy to us. We are not just bringing food to communities, we're bringing hope. When they see us coming, they know help is on the way.
Thank you, Ed, for challenging us to be risk takers. I think, Jeanette and I got to spend a little time at a Convoy of Hope kind of event where we, mostly pastors here, how money that's been contributed has been spent, and what are some of the projects and things that Convoy is hoping to tackle in the years to come. Kind of I guess a spiritual shareholders report and vision plan. And I could tell you about all these amazing things that make Convoy of Hope probably my favorite nonprofit on the planet. I mean, just amazing things that they accomplish. And Madagascar is one of 138 countries that they're actively operating in right now, either because of a natural disaster or because of an economic infrastructure that just is a disaster all the time. And I'm not going to share all those things because as I sat in those meetings, often I was just brought to tears, realizing how often I'm focused on problems that are so much smaller than the problems that most of the world lives with. I have had times where I've felt financially tight, but I've never not been able to feed my children. You know, I've had times where I lost a job, but I've never had the hopelessness of there is no job anywhere to find. And I don't know if you grew up here and you don't know anything different, or maybe you are from a country where some of those experiences are real. The bottom line is the Lord has given us a privilege. He's given us a privilege of being in a country where we can worship Jesus without really consequence. He's given us a privilege of being in a place where education and economic resources are available to us. And we can compare ourselves to other people in our culture, but you know what that is? Literally, that's the top 1% of wealth in the world saying, I wish I was 99.9% better than everybody than 99.1% better off than everybody else. I don't know what you call that, but when I talk to my kids about that, I call it entitlement. You know, Ed and people at Convoy, their job is to somehow gently bring to us the reality that we have a lot, and we are called to steward it well. Called to steward it well. And so as I sat in those meetings, the thing that kept coming back to my head is that passage from James that kind of sums up faith being put into action in this way. It says, true religion is this, that you keep your own heart pure and you care for orphans and widows in their distress. I can't think of an organization in the world that does that better than Convoy of Hope. And we have the opportunity to partner with them today. We've talked about giving 1 day's wages, and I think we have a chart up here that talks about if you need help with the math, I know I did. This is kind of a breakdown of if this is what you annually make. This is what 1 day's wage does. Here's what's crazy. 1 day's wage for us can make the difference in a kid's life for weeks and months because of Convoy's partnerships. It's kind of amazing. But again, the thing that compels me is not about a money amount. In fact, as Jeanette and I kind of prayed over the weekend, we felt like, man, we know what it is to give 1 day's wage, but we can do better than that. We prayed about, Lord, what do you want us to do? And so, you know, we are giving just like we ask you to give, and we're giving above and beyond what's been asked of us because we know that even something that feels like a sacrifice to us in our culture is nowhere near the level of challenge that the people that this money is going to, that they face. And so I want to ask you this morning, one, would you just simply consider what it is to give 1 day's wage to feed people that don't have a wage, families that can't feed themselves? That's the baseline. And if you're at a place where you don't have a job or you can't, you know, maybe you need to consider that side of Ed's message where like, well, what else needs to change in your life? Is there some recklessness that needs to change? Like, is there a trajectory in life that you need to change? Maybe that's your offering to the Lord today, and that's wonderful. But for many of us, it's just simply getting the perspective that even on our worst day, we often aren't facing the challenges that much of the rest of the world is. So how can we be part of the solution? I want to ask you, as the worship team just kind of sings a chorus over us, I want to ask you to pray about, Lord, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to give 1 day's wage? It's important that we are led by the voice of the Holy Spirit, by the prompting of the Holy Spirit, by the conviction of the Holy Spirit and how we respond to the Lord. And I want you to respond in that way. And it always helps me sometimes to take out a physical giving envelope and to say, Lord, what do you want me to do with this? Or if you're an online person, you can pull up the giving app, soundlifechurch.org/give, and there's a one day to feed the world on the drop-down menu. Select that. If you are writing a check, make it out to Sound Life Church, but mark one day on the envelope, and every penny that's given is going to be put in one big lump check and sent to Convoy over the course of the week. But the important thing is that we are faithful with what God has given us. And the amazing thing is that God can use what we give to impact people that we may never meet this side of heaven. So, would you pray about that, and let's respond together in a few minutes.